Hello everybody and welcome to my first set of video tutorials. This section of tutorials will be covering Apple's Objective-C programming language that extends between their iOS and Mac OS X platforms. This first section of video tutorials is for beginners. I will also be covering a section for advanced users. The reason for this is that beginners don't know much about programming, and advanced users coming from C++ and other programming languages don't want to hear all this extra stuff in between. So head over to my channel and check out my advanced tutorials if that's where the angle you're coming from. Alright, and let's begin. I'd like to start by first introducing myself. My name's Jared. I'm currently studying computer science, and I felt that there was a need to create these videos because a lot of videos presently on the internet do not fully cover this stuff, and I don't feel that the quality that is presented is really out there. However, if you're looking for two alternative sources to learn Apple's iOS and Objective-C programming language, I would recommend the YouTube channel Apple Programming, and I would also recommend Paul Hegarty. If I said that right, he is on iTunes University. Alright? And let's begin. The first thing you will need as a new software developer on a Mac OS for programming on iOS or Macintosh itself is you need an Apple computer. Once you have an Apple computer, you need to open up the internet, and from there you need to go over to apple.com, and once you're on apple.com, you'll want to go over to the search pane and type Xcode. After you select Xcode, you'll be brought up to this quick explanation of what Xcode is. You can feel free to read about it, or you can also head over to the Mac App Store, and from the Mac App Store you'll be able to search for Xcode and download it. It's a free download, but it's quite heavy and is a lot of disk space, so you may want to free up some disk space or be on a fast internet connection when you download it. As you see, it is 1.65 gigabytes. Okay, so once you've installed that, you can close out of these web browsers, and then you can launch Xcode from Launchpad. So there'll be a couple things I'll be showing you guys. There's two ways I can go about this. I can either show you the graphical user interface, or I can show you the command line, both which use Objective-C. The only difference is the graphical portion will cover a more that got distracted. The graphical portion will cover more in-depth stuff because you have to mess with UIKit, while on the other hand, the terminal version is just dealing with Objective-C. And since you're all new developers, I don't want to do too much in the beginning, so this first tutorial is going to cover up some of the basics of using terminal programming in Xcode. So you're going to want to go to File, New, Project, and then from there you're going to be presented with two mediums of creating applications. You can do it for iOS or Mac OS X. Since I said I don't want to deal with Cocoa at the moment, which for those of you that don't know, Cocoa is the framework and graphical user interface for both Mac OS X and iOS, I actually just want to use Objective-C in terminal. So you go over to Application under OS X and choose Command Line Tool. Click Next. And then from there type product name, and then in this case I'm going to type my application. You can name it whatever you want. From there it's going to ask what type of project are you building. I'm going to choose Foundation. Now there's the meaning behind these is different types of programming languages. Apple has different APIs and stuff. C would be a very old type of programming language. C++ is what more people are familiar with, and then these are different foundations that you can build upon. Foundation is their general thing. Also, enable automatic reference counting. This is going to deal with memory usage and stuff that you guys don't really have to worry about. And then from there, I would recommend creating a folder called developer by clicking new folder, and then once you have a developer folder, click on it and hit create. Alright, and then once that comes up, you'll notice a couple of different things here. First is you'll have your main.m file, some imports, some comments, and stuff like that. You can quickly compile by clicking run up here. It'll pre-compile the headers and it'll say hello world. So let's go ahead and go through and see what some of this means, okay? All right, to begin, I want to first cover something really quickly to get this out of the way. Automatic reference counting, like I said, will deal with memory management. For instance, if you keep creating new things on a computer, it'll keep increasing your memory, and if it'll eventually run out once it hits the amount of RAM usage you have. This thing called auto release pool is new ever since iOS 5, and it's on the Mac OS as well. Basically, anything that's in between this auto release pool block will be formulated in a way that automatic reference counting will actually work. Another way to know if you're not using automatic reference counting is you'll have this at the top. By the way, when I type this, it's going to crash, and as a matter of fact, it's not even going to let me do it because I'm using Arc, but if I go through it anyway, if you have something like this in your command line, then you know that you're not on automatic reference counting, and you're dealing with memory management manually, and you want to go back and make sure that you actually checked that box. Anyhow, to continue, you want to make sure that everything you program is under this auto release pool. And the primary reason for that, like I said, is if you're not, you're doing memory management manually, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's confusing for a new programmer. Okay. So the first thing you saw is hello world got printed out on the screen. The way that works is there's a command called nslog, and nslog accepts what's called an ns string. Pretty much an ns string is it's not a typedef, but it's a class that holds a const char star, which is basically a bunch of characters in a string and forms them in what's called an array. So to begin, and whenever you want to type something in nslog, you always start with this @ symbol. It tells the compiler that you're about to create a string of const stars. So you formulate it in between two parentheses, and you type whatever you want. You could type, hello, my name is, and if you print that by running the application, it will say, hello, my name is, : Well, there's something else you can also do. There's also ns strings. And ns strings can be created by typing ns string, and then right here you can define the variable name, and you can call it anything you want. You can call it my name, and then you could type your name. It's going to pop up with a quick little error here, and the reason is because I forgot the @ symbol. Like I said, the @ symbol has to be placed before a string, or else the compiler won't really know what you're doing. You're going to notice you also have this yellow warning. The yellow warning basically says that this variable name, my name, is not used. And that should warn you because you're wasting memory. You created something and it's not being used in your program. So the way you can use this is you can put a identifier like that and type. What this is going to do is it's going to output, hello, my name is : Jared. Okay, so what this basically did is it outputted this string of const chars called hello, my name is, and then this %@ identifier means that you're going to be putting a string here. There's many different ones. There's %ld, which is for a long. There's many different ones for different type of variables you put in. So for example, if I say, hello, my name is this thing, and my age is, up here you can put ns number, my age equals like 20. And notice it's kind of freaking out on you because it's saying incompatible integer to point conversion, ns number strong with an expression of type int. And there's many different ways you can deal with this. Let me show you a couple. So the reason it's erroring pretty much is ns number is a class, and a class is pretty much an object that holds many different types of things. And in normal programming like C and C++, people are used to saying int my variable equals 20, and that's good for C, but we're coding in Objective-C. And you want to use Apple's NS number because it's a class, you can do many different things with it. So we're going to erase this 20 and we're going to put NS number with integer, and now we can type any number we want. I could say 20 like that, and now you have the yellow exclamation saying that the variable is not used. Also, I wanted to show you, if you click on this side, you're going to get what's called a breakpoint. We're not going to cover that yet. To get rid of it, click on it to where it's semi-translucent, right click and select delete breakpoint. Like I said, that'll only happen if you actually click on it. If that didn't happen, whatever. So now you actually have a variable that is an integer and it's 20. So it's going to say, hello, my name is Jared and my age is 20. So if I run this application, I'm going to have an error. Now the reason I have an error is because I never NS logged this my age. So to do that, I can put another comma right here, and you can keep putting commas. I can put my age. Now I'm going to get an error. So it's going to say, well, you're giving it an extra variable, but you haven't placed it in the string yet. So let's say I try to do %at. Well, %at means it's going to take a random object, if you will. In this case, it worked. You can also change that %at. Like, let's say, like, here's something incorrect. I'm saying it's a long. Well, it's going to warn me. It's going to say, well, wait, you're giving me an integer and you're telling me it's long. It's going to say, why don't you change this to %at, which is a random object. And that'll work. And I don't want to get too complicated, but there's different types of numbers in programming languages. But you could also say, you could also pull certain types of things. Like, for instance, something like unsigned int value, which means that the number can only be positive. And now it's going to give you a warning, because instead of giving it an object of NS number, you're now giving it a literal. A literal is like I showed you a second ago, and which is like C, which is where you could type int high equals 20. Well, pretty much now you're actually giving it a literal, which is this. And the compiler says you can no longer use %at because it's no longer an object. It's going to give you a warning, and it's going to say you need to replace this with u. The %u means unsigned integer. So now, same thing's going to happen if I log this out. It's going to say, hello, my name is Jared, and my age is 20. So we didn't do anything except tell NSLog that we're giving it a actual number. Now, since this is a beginner tutorial, like I said, if you are looking for more advanced stuff, you're going to need to go to the other side of my profile to view the advanced tutorials. But at the same time, let me do a quick explanation of the difference between unsigned ints, etc., because it is important that you know the difference. So, for instance, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to start coding in no longer in Objective-C, but C itself. In C, all C code will work inside of Objective-C. It's backwards compatible, if you will. So I'm going to cover a couple of different things. The first one is an integer, okay? And an integer is 32 bits, which means if I pull open my calculator, it means that if I take 2 and I raise it to the power, hold on, I gotta switch the format of the calculator to scientific. Okay, so if I take 2 and I raise it to the 32nd for 32 bits, I can have up to 4 billion as the number inside of it. But let's say I wanted to put 5 billion there. It's going to have an overflow. And you can't do that with an integer. So for instance, if let's say I say int high equals 5 billion. Let me count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's actually 5, 8. So I just give it something crazy. Let's just keep going. All right, so this is obviously outside the scope of an integer. It's going to tell you implicit conversion from long to int changes value from this to this. So you entered this huge number, but it's actually going to get changed once it compiles to 1, 7, etc. And the reason for that is, like I said, this integer can only hold 2 to the 32nd, which is 4 billion. Does that make sense? So if you actually wanted to do more, you have to type long, and that'll allocate 64 bytes. So if I go back to the calculator, did I close it? Yes, I closed it. So if I go back to the calculator and I do 2 to the 64, I don't have the number memorized, but notice it goes out 19 decimal places. And Yeah, that's big enough to hold a lot of big numbers. So the only reason people don't always use longs for everything and they use ints is they want to use smaller variables. And I haven't coded in C in a while, but there's also something called a short. And for example, if I do short high and I try to do 2 billion, it's going to freak out as well. And the reason is a short is 16 bits. So an integer was 32, short 16. If you go to the calculator, and what's cool about Spotlight is you can actually do all of this all in Spotlight, it'll say that it can hold 65,536. So 65,536. So if I put that there, 65,536, I'm still going to have an issue. And you're saying, well, why am I going to have an issue? Well, the reason you're having an issue is a short can hold up to 65,536. However, what about negative numbers? Well, negatives have to allocate half of this for the positive side and half of this for the negative side. So for example, if I want to only have positives, I can type unsigned, and this will let me take advantage of everything inside of there. And you can never have exactly the right amount of bytes. The compiler will freak out. You always got to go one lower. But I've never understood that. But anyhow, so now I can take advantage of the full amount of memory 2 to the 16 because I said unsigned. Now if I take away the unsigned, it's going to freak out again. But I can have half of that number. So if I type 65536 divided by 2, so 32,767. It's no longer going to freak out. And the reason it's not going to freak out anymore, just to show you, it's just saying that the variable is unused now. The reason it's not going to freak out anymore is because I'm not taking up all the memory. I can also go negative with this since it's no longer unsigned, and I can go in the negative direction. But I can't go any more than this or else it'll freak out. So that's kind of a quick example of how ints, shorts, longs, and how they work. Pretty much unsigned lets you take full advantage of all the memory. Removing the unsigned will allow you to go in the positive and negative direction of those bytes. Okay, so let's continue and talk more about some of the quick stuff that there is to know in Objective-C, and we'll continue. Also, please understand, if you're not understanding this integer, this long, and all this unsigned stuff that I'm talking about, that's fine. You don't have to understand it right now. I was just kind of going over it. So now I want to dive into classes. And I'm moving real fast because a lot of those other tutorials take a long time to explain something and you never get into anything. You go through hours and hours of tutorials and you never get anywhere. It's like these people only know certain things and they never move forward. That's why I recommended those 2 other people at the beginning of the tutorial. So I'm going to continue, and now we're going to learn about classes. So class, for somebody that is new to programming, is basically a container for a bunch of objects. So you know how I had an integer that held 20, I had a string that held my name. Well, I can put all these in one object, if you will. And let me show you how to do that. It's a whole lot easier to show than it is to explain. So what I'm going to do is you're going to go to File, New, and you're going to go to New File. You can also do Command N to open this window. All right, and you're going to choose Objective-C class. You're going to select Next, and you're going to type any class you want. So for example, I'm going to type Gradebook. We're going to make this a class that stores grades. So I'm going to type Gradebook. You can type whatever you want right here. It doesn't really matter. It's pseudo. However, subclass, you're going to be able to subclass tons of different things. We're just going to subclass NSObject. Subclassing means I can take everything that class has and use it for myself. Okay? If I didn't subclass anything, I could not use Objective-C. I could actually only use C programming, which is that int, etc. I couldn't use NSNumber. I couldn't use NSString. So new NSObject, I'm going to click Next. I'm going to create it, just going to put it in that directory, and you're going to notice I have 2 new things, a header file, which is what the .h stands for, and a .m for implementation. So the way a header file works is anything that's placed in a header file is public. So that basically means that if you put it in a header file, other things can use it. If it's not in the header file, it's all private. Okay, and I'm going to explain the difference real quick. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an initialization method. So to create a method in this type of language, you're going to, here, let me just show you. So as far as classes go, I would like to talk about two different things. In Objective-C, there's what is known as class methods and instance methods. The only difference between the two is an instance method has to be created and a class method does not. So for example, I'm not going to show you class methods yet. We're just going to stick with instance methods, but then I will, at the end of this tutorial, show you an example of a class method, and we'll go from there. Okay, so to start, we created our gradebook, and there's no code in it. Okay, we need to create a couple of different things. The first is we need to define somebody's age, their name, and their grade. Okay, so to start by doing that, we're going to create a couple of different things. We're going to create a person's start. Let's do ns string. Actually, I want to change up what I did before. I created a grade book, and instead of it being a grade book, I want it to be a person. And the reason is I don't want to go into arrays at the moment. I think that's too complicated for this tutorial. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to rename these by clicking on them to person. So type person for the H, and then type person for the M class, and then change this to person.h. Implementation is person. And if you don't want to have to redo all this, you could just delete these two files and recreate the class and call it person, and it inherits NS object. Okay, save that, save that. Okay, and to save, just Command S or go to File, Save. All right. So from there, a person needs to contain its age, name, and it also needs to know what grade it has. Now, there's two different types of ways you can do properties in Objective-C. You can actually create a property, or you can stick with a localized instance. I've never understood why there's a difference. I'm assuming it has to do with memory management. I'm going to show you both. So, for instance, you can have this, and you could say name. Well, I probably shouldn't use name. My name. There we go. You can also have I'll make sure you're in the header file, by the way, and type this in interface. You can also have a person's age, so you can go ns number, my age, and you can have ns number, my grade. All right. Basically, you created a string to hold the person's name, the age, and the grade. The reason you did it in the header file is I want this to be translucent between the whole class. Okay, I'll explain that more in a moment. Once it's done, I'll recap. So the next thing we want to do is we want somebody to be able to define the person's name, age, and grade. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm actually going to do first is I'm going to make an instance method to define these variables. All right, so I'm going to, an instance method is always specified with a minus before it, by the way. It returns nothing, and I'm going to say set person information. Okay, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to type. Then what you're going to do is you're going to put a colon, and you're going to type ns string. And what I like to do here is type set age, and then type, probably go, actually, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say set age, set name, and then you want to type set age. And for this part, do another colon, and this time do ns number star. And then you can also go, and then you need to define something. I'm going to just type age right here, and then also say set grade, NS number, star, grade. All right. What you basically just did here is you created an instance method that'll let you set a name, set an age, and set a grade. All right. It'll let you set a name, an age, and a grade. And you may say, well, what is these two things? These are how you access it from your class, which I'll show you right now. So copy this one line of information, go over to your implementation file, paste this, get rid of the semicolon, press enter, and create 2 curly brackets. So from here, you're actually able to accept the name, the age, and the grade, and you're able to actually throw it into your class. So what you can do is, see how it's called my name, my age, and my grade? Well, you could say my name, and you could say equals set name, and then you can go my age equals age, my grade equals grade. If you run this, you'll notice something. It fails, and it says file not found, gradebook.h. Okay, this is because I was playing around with something. Give me 1 second, I'll show you why I did that. So click this file button so you go back to your file. You won't have this error. Let me just fix this real quick. I was playing with something off recording, so you probably won't even have that in there. Give me a sec. All right, so when you compile, you'll notice that it does nothing. The application literally opened and it stopped. So it builds, it runs, it stops. You don't even notice that it's shut down, but it pretty much runs this main function and then returns 0 and dies, okay? So what we can do here is we now need to be able to create this object, the whole thing that I was showing you. So what you can do is you can type person and then call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it my person equals person alloc. And what alloc does is it says take this class and allocate room for it in memory, and then type init. And if you go over here, you'll notice it says use of undeclared identifier person. And the reason is because you never told the program what person is. It's like, well, what's that? So if you come up here and you import it, now it'll actually know who person is. So you may have noticed when I was typing that the compiler didn't really understand what was going on. You can keep this. I'm just showing you. Now I can actually type person, my person equals person alloc, and it won't come up with incorrect stuff now, and I can type init. All right. Oh, and real quick, my bad. I had to actually put that there. Okay. So now I have a person. However, you may say, well, let's get the person's age. Well, watch what happens. So if I say, or let's just say the name. So if I say get the person's name, notice that you can't really get any of it. And the reason for that is it doesn't really, you don't have access to it. Remember I told you anything in interface is public. However, these variables cannot be grabbed without a method to grab them unless they are properties. So for instance, actually I'm not going to show you that yet. Let's say you want to actually get the person's name. Well, you actually have to create a method to do that. You type void get name. Actually, this wouldn't be a void. This would be an NS string. And you would say get name. And from there, you would do this, and you would return my name. And notice right here, if you click on the error, it's kind of confused. And the reason it's confused is, once again, this is a header file. You can't define this stuff right here. So now what you can do is you can take this variable, go back to implementation, type return my name. And you may say, well, why did we have to do that? Well, these things over here, like I said, cannot be grabbed. They can't be grabbed unless they are properties. And I'll show you, let me just show you a property real quick. But for instance, if I go back to main.m now, this still didn't work, but that's because notice that I made a variable called getName. So if I want that, let me get rid of this junk that I typed. You would type my person getName. And now if I run the application, you get null. Now, give you a second. Why do you think it returned null? Well, I created the class. Now, for those of you that don't know, null means there's nothing there in memory. There's nothing to show. Now, the reason you got null is if you create this class, you allocate it in memory, and then you initialize it. Okay? However, when you do that, you just create this. You never gave it its name, you never gave it its age, you never gave it its grade. So you created this class and you said, return what's in name. Well, you never defined it. You never said what was in name. It's null. There's nothing there. So if up here I type, I'm sorry, go back to main.m. Before I log it, I could type this. I could say, my person set person information. Now you can give it stuff. You can say, my name is Jared, my age is 23, and my grade is a 90. Now notice, once again, it doesn't understand this part because 23 is a literal. It's an integer, right? Or it's a short, one of the two, but it's not an NS number, and I'm asking for an NS number. So what you can do is you can get rid of that 23, type NS number with, I'm just going to do short because we're not, my age, nobody's age is above, 65,000, and I'm just going to type 23. Now I have to do the same thing with the grade. NS number with short, and I'm going to type 90. Now, you'll notice if I run the application, it knows my name's Jared. Now I could do the same thing. I could do another NS log, say it's a string. My first variable is a %at, so it wants an object, and I could say my person get, notice I can't get the age. Well, the reason I can't get the age is if you go back over to person.h, we only made one method. We made a getName method. We didn't make a method to get the age and to get the grade. So we need to make those. So it's going to return an NS number, get age, also need another one, NS number, get grade. We need to implement these. I'm going to copy these two, go over to implementation, get rid of these semicolons, return my age, return my grade. All right, now if I go back over to the implementation, I can type get age, whoops, and I can do the same thing with the grade. Now I'll get Jared, I'll get 23, and I'll get 90. There you go. Now the program is shutting down immediately after I'm running this because it's going through whatever it's told to do, and then it returns 0. Well, returning 0 in the main function pretty much says, I'm done. So it shuts down. It doesn't stay open. There's no reason to stay open. It's done what it has to do, and now it's over. It's closed out. So that's a quick example of how an object works. So notice I just created one thing. I created a person, set its information, and now I can grab things out of that object. Well, I can use this person in many different places. I could set the information again. So if I take this variable, this method, and I copy it, whoops, doing all this with the trackpad, bear with me, and I do that again, let's change it. Let's say Mark, age is 17, and his grade is a 23, which would be horrible. If I run it, watch what happens. Well, I got my information, then I got his information. And the reason is I created the object. I didn't have to create it twice. I created the object. I set the information. I got the information out of that object, but then I reset his information, got the information again. Well, what good is that? Now I lost all of Jared's information. Well, you could actually do something else. You could, for example, say, instead of calling this my person, you could call this like person number 1, and then create another one and call it person number 2, and create a new person. Whoops. Now this is going to end up doing the same thing after I finish typing, and the reason for that is it's just the same thing, I just changed it up a bit. So the only difference now is I have two things and they're both keeping that information. So same thing happened again. However, I didn't lose the original information that was in Jared because I created two different people. See, I have person number 1 and I'm getting his age, etc. So that's how that works. It's not that complicated. Many people from different programming languages are used to typing something like person number 1 dot get age. And it's not that that doesn't work, that's just not how we program in Objective-C, because when you do a period or a dot, and you can ignore me if you don't know what I'm talking about, but when you do a dot notation in Objective-C, you're actually asking to get an instance variable, which is what I just made. But what we want is we actually want to get an instance method. Now, see how complicated this is? I had to, in person.m, I had to make all these instance methods to get the age, to get the name, I had to set person information. Well, there's another thing. Let's create another thing. What else could a person have? They could have their student ID. Well, instead of actually doing what we did before, which is set up a variable and then set that variable, I'm going to show you a property. It does the same exact thing, except it saves you some time. All right, so go outside of these braces. You're still in interface because interface starts here and it ends where it says end. All right, so outside of these, see, inside of these braces, you put variables. Well, we're not going to make a variable anymore. We're going to do a property. So type property. Don't even bother about what these mean at the moment. I'm going to say them real quick for those of you that care, but we'll go over it later. Non-atomic strong, and then I'm going to call it my student number. Well, actually, sorry, it's NS number star my student number. And non-atomic has to do with multi-threading and thread safety and stuff. Don't worry about that yet. Strong is just how we point to that object. You could have a strong pointer or a weak pointer. Not going to go into that either. However, let's continue. So I said property, NS number, my student number. And some people, and I'm not sure if you can do this in Mac OS. I know you can do this in see if that works. Yeah, just ignore what I was doing there. I was kind of playing around. All right, so now you have a property. You don't have to do get age, get name, get grade. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to do set person information. Well, you would if you wanted to set the name, the age, and the grade. But just for this variable right here, I can get the student number and I can set the student number. Watch how easy this is. You're going to wonder why we didn't do this the whole time. So now I can go, it's literally this simple. I can go person number 1. And what did I call it again? I called the variable my student number. And I can say my student number colon, because I have to give it an NS number now. And I can go NS number with int, because student numbers could be long. And I'm going to type, whoops. And it says, no visible interface for person declares the selector my student number. I'm going to give you a second to think about that. Why do you think it says no visible interface for person declares the selector my student number? The reason for it is actually very simple and easy to explain. Properties, remember how we created in person.m, we created a get, and there's also a set? Well, properties are a little different in that we're no longer needing to get and set something. I'm sorry, we are needing to get and set something. We no longer have to create instance methods for it. So for instance, now I can go back over here, and instead of doing person number 1, my student number, it's actually a little easier than that. Just type set. And when you type set, it's still incorrect, probably because I got some capitalization issue. Hold on one sec, we'll just type it out. Person number 1, set, oh, it changes it to a capital M, so I'll just redo it anyway. Set my student number, and then it wants an NS number, and you have to put this in a block. It's not really a block when I say that. You need to put it in 2 brackets. NS number, number with integer. Call it whatever I want. You need to make another parentheses to match up. I'll delete this one because it's wrong. Notice the difference though. All I had to do was do set. And I can do the same thing. I can do get. It adds that set and that get before the property. So now I set my student number, right? So now I set it for person number 1. Let's set it for person number 2. I can go person number 2, set my student number, an NS number, number with int, shorter student number. Could have been at the school longer, who knows. And then it's very simple actually. I can go nslog, and I can go, here, let me just close that up. Okay, there we go. And I can go person number 1, and instead of having to do get name or get age or get student number, you know, etc., I can actually just get my student number. Once again though, no visible person for this. And you could try this, it works. So it doesn't put a get, like I said, I was just trying to get you thinking. It doesn't put a get before this, it only puts a set. And the reason for that is there's no reason to say get. The set is extra, so you can define this. You can put something there. You don't have to say get. It just knows when you type my student number that that's what you're grabbing. All right? So notice that's good. Let's do it again for the second person, for Mark. Type nslog %. Now we're going to get the student number. See? I have mine, and I have that one. All right, so I know that was a lot of information for the first video tutorial. Like I said, I don't like how a lot of the other guys go extremely slow, so I decided to throw a whole lot at you. If you get confused, go over it again. You can always ask me a question, send me a message, comment. I try to go kind of quickly and cover a lot of information at once. A lot of this may be a little confusing at first. That's fine. It probably will be, especially if you're a beginner. I know I said this was a beginner tutorial. I kind of threw some advanced stuff in here of learning the language with some beginner things about talking about what integers are and class methods and stuff. And you know, that's good and all, but I just wanted to give you guys a good foundation and feel for how this language works. It's pretty powerful, and subscribe to me, and the next video tutorial will get into even more complicated things, arrays. I'll talk about class methods, stuff like that. But this is a very powerful language. It's actually becoming one of my more favorite languages. I like it more than C++ and a lot of the other languages I've been programming in. So that concludes tutorial number 1 for beginners of Objective-C. Tune in next time. Thank you, and we hope you have a great day.